Resident Evil has gone through a long, and when I say long, I really mean a long list of games, movies, series, and much more. The history of this saga is like a living organism, constantly growing, transforming, and surprising us. And the word long here is not just filler, it's almost a warning. This franchise has spanned decades of experimentation, reinvention, and storytelling. Always in constant evolution, Resident Evil has never allowed itself to be fossilized. If there is something you cannot criticize this series for, it's for not trying new things. Even when those risks caused division among fans, even when some creative decisions were controversial or polarizing, the willingness to experiment has kept the saga alive and relevant. So, in this video, I want us to embark together on a chronological journey through its most popular video games, one by one, exploring not just what they offered mechanically or narratively, but also how they impacted the overall franchise and the gaming landscape as a whole. Because Resident Evil isn't just a series, it's a mirror of how survival horror has evolved, how audiences' tastes have shifted, and how Capcom has danced between horror, action, and reinvention to keep the flame alive. Until we arrive at what we know today as Resident Evil, a saga both familiar and ever-changing. Now, let me set a boundary before we start. I'll leave aside the animated movies and spin-off series. Not because they lack value, they do have their moments, and many fans adore them, but because they are more of a complement than the true driving force of evolution. The heart of Resident Evil beats strongest in its video games. That's where the risks were taken, where mechanics changed gaming forever, and where the tone of horror was defined again and again. So get comfortable, grab a drink, dim the lights if you dare, and let's begin this long trip through memory and innovation. And what better place to begin this journey than at the very start, in 1996, in a dark and isolated mansion. The first Resident Evil, released in 1996, was the birth of it all. The now iconic Spencer Mansion was more than just a setting. It was a character, an oppressive labyrinth filled with mystery, secrets, and dangers around every corner. The most striking feature was its fixed camera angles, peculiar, restrictive, but also genius. These perspectives weren't random. They were carefully chosen to maximize suspense, to show you just enough while keeping the unknown looming. Our protagonists were Jill Valentine and Chris Redfield, who stepped into what seemed like a routine investigation and quickly descended into a nightmare. The game demanded precision and caution. Ammo was scarce. Puzzles required thought under pressure, and every creak of the mansion left you tense. It was survival horror in its purest form. With relatively few elements, it created an unforgettable atmosphere of dread. Resident Evil wasn't just a game, it was a pioneer. It introduced millions of players to the idea that fear could be interactive, that horror could be lived, not just watched. But if anyone thought that was the peak, Resident Evil 2, released in 1998, proved that Capcom had only just begun. The sequel expanded the scale enormously. Instead of being trapped in one house, now we were in the chaos of an entire city, consumed by an outbreak. This was no longer a claustrophobic nightmare, it was a catastrophe on a massive scale. We now controlled two new protagonists who would go on to become legends. Leon S. Kennedy, a rookie cop on his first day, and Claire Redfield, Chris's determined younger sister. Their stories intertwined beautifully, with the now famous zapping system, allowing players to experience two perspectives that connected, overlapped, and revealed different pieces of the narrative puzzle. Replayability wasn't just encouraged, it was rewarded. The atmosphere was bigger, more cinematic, and the story richer, filled with cutscenes that gave emotional weight to the chaos. Resident Evil 2 didn't just build upon the original, it redefined what a sequel could be, consolidating Resident Evil as a global phenomenon. This was the moment where the series stopped being a cult hit and became a cornerstone of gaming history. Then came Resident Evil 3, Nemesis in 1999, and with it, a new kind of terror. Jill Valentine returned as the protagonist, trying to escape Raccoon City before its total destruction. The ticking clock of the city's imminent fall created a sense of urgency, but the true nightmare was the relentless Nemesis. Nemesis wasn't just another boss, he was a presence, a hunter that stalked you at random, smashing through walls and refusing to stop. For the first time, players experienced true unpredictability. Fear was no longer scripted, it was dynamic. You never knew when Nemesis would appear, and that kept you on edge for the entire game. Yes, the action level increased. Yes, there were more weapons, more explosions, more chases, but the essence of survival horror, the vulnerability, the resource management, the mystery of Umbrella remained. Nemesis became a gaming icon, embodying unstoppable fear in ways few enemies ever had. The year 2000 brought us Resident Evil Code Veronica. This was Claire's story again, as she searched desperately for her brother Chris, only to find herself imprisoned on an Umbrella-controlled island. The story took new twists, introducing the Ashford family and deepening Umbrella's sinister mythos. Technically, this was also a leap forward. Gone were the static, pre-rendered backgrounds. Now the environments were fully 3D, which gave the game a more modern and alive feeling. Narratively, it was richer and more ambitious, providing more context, more personal drama, and more of Umbrella's corrupt legacy. Fans appreciated its complexity, even if it was notoriously challenging. Then came 2002's Resident Evil Remake, a reimagining of the original that is still hailed as one of the best remakes ever made. This wasn't just improved graphics, though the visuals were jaw-dropping for the time. It was a total overhaul. Shadows and lighting elevated the tension. New puzzles forced even veterans to think. And terrifying additions like the Crimson Heads, zombies that resurrected into faster, deadlier predators, meant no one could feel safe. It wasn't nostalgia, it was resurrection. It cemented itself as one of the greatest survival horror experiences ever crafted. Then in 2005 came the earthquake, Resident Evil 4. This was no incremental change. It was a reinvention of the very language of Resident Evil and arguably of third-person gaming as a whole. We followed Leon Kennedy again, now a US agent, tasked with rescuing the president's kidnapped daughter in a remote European village. What began as a mission quickly spiraled into madness with the introduction of a new parasite, Las Plagas, and a cult led by the sinister Sadler. Gameplay was transformed. Out went the fixed cameras. In came the revolutionary over-the-shoulder perspective. Combat was fluid, responsive, and thrilling. Quick-time events, cinematic boss battles, and witty dialogue turned Leon into an action hero. Horror was still present, but now fused with explosive spectacle. The influence of Resident Evil 4 is still felt today. Its DNA can be traced in almost every modern third-person shooter. For many fans, this was the peak. The game balanced intensity, variety, and personality in a way no other had before. It put Resident Evil on a new pedestal, both critically and commercially, and proved once again that Capcom was never afraid to take bold risks. Then came Resident Evil 5, a game that marked yet another turning point in the series. This time we returned with more protagonists, including the already mentioned and deeply beloved Chris Redfield. The story transported us to Africa, a setting rarely explored in major games at the time, and one that carried a different kind of atmosphere. Sun-drenched landscapes, villages filled with tension, and a sense of unease that came not from shadows but from the scorching heat and the people who lurked within it. The narrative placed Chris on a mission to investigate the origins of the virus itself, digging into the very roots of the nightmare that had been unfolding for over a decade. And in this journey, he would once again confront Albert Wesker, one of the most iconic villains the saga has ever given us. Their confrontation built up to a cinematic climax where action completely stole the spotlight. If earlier entries still carried remnants of horror, here the focus shifted entirely. Explosions, high-octane set pieces, relentless combat. Resident Evil 5 was pure action. The horror almost didn't exist anymore, at least not in the way longtime fans had known it. Yet here's something interesting. The game sold phenomenally well. From a commercial perspective, the saga was stronger than ever, clearly on the rise. But beneath the surface, among the fan base, something different was brewing. Many players were starting to miss the magic ingredient, the particular element that had made Resident Evil unforgettable in the first place. Genuine, skin-crawling horror. Then came Resident Evil 6. It followed the same action-driven path, but amplified it to blockbuster proportions. This time, we had an ensemble cast of protagonists: Leon Kennedy, Chris Redfield, Jake Muller, and of course, Ada Wong. The plot, at least on paper, seemed like a return to the roots. Another outbreak, a global threat, the terrifying possibility of civilization collapsing under the weight of infection. But the execution was different. The game introduced 3 separate campaigns, each with its own style and tone, overlapping narratives designed to give players variety and spectacle. In one, you were dealing with a darker, more horror-tinged atmosphere with Leon. In another, pure militarized action with Chris. On the surface, this variety looked impressive, but when it came to the heart of it, the experience leaned heavily toward high-budget action spectacle. Explosions, car chases, chaotic shootouts, the kind of things you'd expect in a summer Hollywood blockbuster rather than a survival horror game. And that was exactly what made many players feel disappointed. Yes, it was ambitious. Yes, it was loud and explosive. But the identity of Resident Evil was blurring. The horror, that palpable fear, the uncertainty of what lay behind the next corner. Fans couldn't feel it anymore. The series was at a crossroads, and many wondered if it had lost its way for good. But then, something miraculous happened. In 2017, Capcom decided to take a bold risk, and the result was Resident Evil 7, Biohazard. For the first time in the mainline series, we were given a new protagonist, someone completely ordinary, Ethan Winters. He wasn't a soldier, nor a police officer, nor a secret agent, just a man searching for his missing wife. That decision alone reshaped the experience. The search brought Ethan to Louisiana, to the decrepit house of the Baker family. And what awaited there was a blend of madness, mutations, and grotesque biological experiments that felt more like a nightmare than a video game. The perspective changed too. For the first time, the series was experienced in first person, trapping players directly inside Ethan's shoes. Suddenly, every hallway felt suffocating, every sound amplified, every shadow a threat. It was a claustrophobic horror, a return to the very roots of what made the franchise terrifying. The gamble worked. Fans loved it. Critics praised it. What seemed like a franchise drifting away from its essence suddenly felt alive again. For many, Biohazard wasn't just a new entry. It was a rebirth. Something that seemed long gone was shining brighter than ever. Only 2 years later, in 2019, Capcom raised the bar once more with what I consider the best remake ever made, Resident Evil 2 Remake. It was more than just a modern facelift. It was a masterclass in how to honor the original while reinventing it for a new generation. Everything that made the 1998 classic great was not only preserved but elevated to orbital levels. Modern graphics brought Raccoon City to life with an unsettling realism. The narrative was reimagined, expanded with a cinematic touch that gave more depth to Leon and Claire's ordeal. Gameplay was redesigned with a free camera, fluid controls, and above all, the terrifying presence of Mr. X, who became a relentless pursuer that refused to give players a moment's peace. The result? A monumental success, universally praised and adored by both veterans and newcomers. If you enjoy horror, this is a game you must experience at least once. And honestly, it deserves a video of its own, so leave me a like because one day, we'll dive deeper into this masterpiece. Then came Resident Evil 3 Remake, and, well, it was okay. After the brilliance of the second remake, this one felt somewhat underwhelming. To be fair, the original Resident Evil 3 was also shorter, so expectations may have been unfairly high. Jill's desperate escape from Raccoon City, constantly chased by Nemesis, was faithfully represented, and the graphics were once again stunning. But the controversy came from the cut content, sections of the original game that never made it into the remake. Solid gameplay, yes, but not the same thunderous impact as its predecessor. In 2021, Resident Evil Village arrived, continuing Ethan's journey after the horrors of Louisiana. This time, the setting shifted to a mysterious European village, straight out of a gothic horror novel. The place was filled with monstrous beings, each more memorable than the last. Among them, of course, the towering Lady Dimitrescu, who became an internet sensation practically overnight for many reasons. Village cleverly mixed what Biohazard had done with its intimate horror but added more action, creating a hybrid experience. Certain moments leaned heavily on tension and dread. The infamous baby section that many still call one of the scariest sequences ever in the franchise, clearly inspired by PT, while others delivered more explosive combat. It was a delicate balance and it worked. Village was a modern success, showing that horror and action could coexist when handled with care. And then came 2023, bringing back one of the most iconic entries, Resident Evil 4 Remake. The remake didn't just replicate the original, it gave Leon a clearer evolution after the traumatic events of Resident Evil 2, and it shows in the way he carries himself throughout the story. Fans embraced it wholeheartedly. The mechanics, the combat, the way familiar moments were reimagined. It was all handled with remarkable precision. Of course, some fans still miss the more sarcastic, over-the-top, almost Hollywood action hero version of Leon from the 2005 classic. But as a whole, the remake stood proudly as both a tribute and a reinvention. And just when we thought we had the roadmap figured out, Capcom surprised us again. Now we have Resident Evil Requiem on the horizon. From what has been revealed, it will return us once more to Raccoon City, but this time with a clearer, more deliberate focus on horror than ever before. If the hints are true, we are looking at a story of resurgence, a return to origins, and a bold step forward all at once. Without a doubt, it feels like the perfect time to analyze where the saga has been and where it is heading. So here we are, a saga that has seen countless transformations, sometimes praised, sometimes criticized, sometimes both at the same time. Resident Evil has never been afraid of change, and that's why it's still alive today, stronger than ever. Now I want to hear from you. Tell me, what do you think of all this? Which of these many games with their constant shifts and reinventions is your favorite? Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more videos like this. And if you've made it all the way to the end, thank you for accompanying me on this long journey through the survival horror franchise that refuses to die. I'll see you in the next one.